After watching the French horror Infested, I was very curious to check out another French horror that's coming to VOD called Pandemonium. It's artsy, darkly comedic, and disturbing. So let's dive in. After realizing he has died at the scene of a car crash, Nathan descends into the depths of hell, where he is doomed to experience the pain of tortured souls along the way. Alright, so I didn't read the synopsis before diving into this movie. I knew it was about a dead guy who goes to hell. Outside of that, nothing. So it really is important to actually understand that once in hell, the main character Nathan encounters different tormented souls, and he gets to see and experience their pain as part of his torture. The film is not good at explaining this portion, so there you go. This has a very art house presentation and vibe to it, with a minimal cast, sparse sets for the most part, and then with a ton of eerie and foreboding atmosphere permeating the story. The limited locations are dreary and depressing, which is exactly what we need to help get into the mind space of eternal damnation. At the beginning of the film, we not only meet Nathan, but a couple of other characters, and they each feel as though they are going to be important to the story. But outside of working to establish Nathan's character, they have no further purpose in the narrative. Now, I loved the setting that Nathan first encounters once he passes from our world to the next. It's brownish gray, smoky with poor visibility, and it just feels very desolate, outside of some bodies that are sprawled haphazardly all around. There's no context for why the bodies are in the locations or the positions they are, and then the camera is so far away from Nathan that it's difficult to discern what he actually sees. We're shown more of an expansive view, which I think is fine as an establishing shot, but we barely get to see the close-up horror or carnage that Nathan sees when he approaches a body. We do finally get small glimpses of them right before Nathan then relives their experience. And this is a very creative and awesome way to introduce some different tones and horrific elements. Nathan watches a seriously disturbed young girl go all Lizzie Borden on her family. But that's not what's shocking or disturbing. It's the attitude that she displays all throughout. Now, I loved this portion because it's vastly different from how the film began, but it still retains all the dread and the unease. Now, while I did like all of the practical effects, especially the makeup, this portion of the story takes entirely too long to tell. At one point, I almost forgot that I was watching something that Nathan was watching and feeling. I mean, we don't get any perspective of him as the events are being relived, so there's no ongoing reaction of this inescapable distress or fear. We get his reaction once the scene is resolved, but it would have been a strong illusion to cut back every now and then to Nathan being horrified without any means to break away from what he's seeing. And then we see Nathan move on to another hell-trapped body, and he then experiences that torment just like he did the first. Now, the second story is shorter, and while it's not as horrifying as the first, I think it's way more emotionally charged and then horrific within that realm, especially when we get to the resolution. There's nothing about this story, or really even the first, that are designed to leave us with any sort of positive or hopeful outlook. They're extremely hopeless, which of course fits the theme of hell perfectly. Now, after this second segment, we get to the part of the story that feels like it's where the movie is actually beginning. We watch Nathan dive further into the depths of hell, and the conversations that he has, they are witty and tragic, but they're also hilarious thanks to his timing and delivery. Unfortunately, though, this final portion, it's introduced and then finished in only a matter of minutes, leaving the story to then be at sort of a cliffhanger. Now, they introduce this very intriguing and even mysterious concept for the narrative, and then stop the storytelling. Is there going to be a follow-up? I mean, I'm actually okay with leaving it like this, but only if we had more vignettes of torment earlier on. I mean, when the movie concludes, it feels like they're only just starting to gain momentum, and there's way more that they need to tell. Ultimately, the story isn't nearly as satisfying as it could be. There's a wonderful concept at play here, and the whole production crafts an ominous landscape full of despair and hopelessness. Set designs, they're sparse but sprawling, creating foreboding environments with endless loneliness. The vignettes we watch Nathan re-experience are dreadful and set the stage wonderfully for ongoing helpless torment. I would much rather have the first vignette trimmed down to allow it to add just a third morose tale so we can watch Nathan dive further into the depths of misery as his eternal fate begins to solidify in his being. The comedic moments are appropriately dark, using witty observations to highlight the perceived injustice of Nathan's eternal judgment. Now, the movie's final act, it feels very much like a setup for a sequel, shifting tones from something quietly ghastly to a scene of frenzied brutality. The violence and gruesomeness are appreciated, but leave us feeling that another act is coming, and one never does. So maybe the director is crafting their own level of torment and hell on the audience, creating this vision of something intriguing and exciting, yet still out of reach and completely unattainable. The premise for this is awesome, but the execution finds itself wanting. It's not quite style over substance, it's just the substance lacks cohesiveness and direction. There's no sex, a little bit of nudity, a lot of profanity, and then a bunch of violence, including self-harm. I give Pandemonium 2.5 out of 5 couches. So are there any hell-themed movies that you enjoy? Let me know about them in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.